There's no lack of political drama in the UK. The latest news came yesterday, and a general election has been called for December 12th. Depending on the outcome, there are still many Brexit scenarios depending on the outcome of this election. Here to explain it all to us is Mark Manger. He's Director of Master of Global Affairs program at Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the University of Toronto. You do have the longest title of anybody I knew, but I did it in one breath. I'm happy that. Thanks so much for joining us. We were talking about, of course, all the central bank activity that happened today, and we've shifted now to trade and specifically to Brexit. Can you just bring us up to speed on your take of where we are now? I know that the delay we've now heard for Brexit, I believe, is until January 31st. We now officially have an election that's coming place on December 12th. So if you could rub your crystal ball and tell us what's going to happen now, that would be great.
Yeah, so this election is about Brexit. I think that is absolutely clear. And the different versions of Brexit that are on the menu are that the Tories are saying, we want the deal that we've negotiated with Brussels passed. The deal's on the table. It is essentially like the deal that Theresa May had negotiated, except for the part that applies to Northern Ireland. Mm-hmm. The Liberal Democrats are saying we want to revoke the notification. We do not want to leave the European Union. So these are very, very clear on their positions. And Labour is somewhere in the middle, and everybody's sort of trying to understand what their position actually is, because they've said that we want a different deal, and we want then put it to a referendum. So it could mean actually that if Labour were to win, that Britain would still leave under some kind of different scenario. But it's really hard to say because they have not been very clear about this.
Why start being clear now? Let me ask you this then. If the Conservatives get a majority, and my understanding is they're polling ahead now, I know that's meaningless in terms of where December actually plays out, but then what would happen then? Then the deal would go through as they are proposing right now.
Yes. So if the Conservatives gain a majority, and it looks very much like it, even though it is very hard to predict, then the deal as it is now would go through. So in fact, the deal has technically already been approved by the previous Parliament. It's just a matter of implementing legislation. And that implementing legislation would then really be passed between the formation of the government after December 12th and January 31st, which is still a very tight timetable, but if the Conservatives gain a majority, then Britain is out of the European Union on January 31st. And
I'll let these guys get in. My last question on this one is that I know there was lots of headlines splashed around today talking about the fact that when this deal goes through, a deal Brexit, not a no-deal Brexit, that I think that every British person, I saw the headline, was going to be £1,000 a year poorer because of the economic unwinding, you will, if in there too. And so is that a number that you think is relevant, interesting to the British populace, or is it an economist just making a measure?
Honestly, I think it's a made-up number.
Yeah,
that's a made-up number. The effects are going to be far more hard to discern. They're going to be far more long-term, and I think the biggest issue really is the uncertainty that this still creates. So we now know how the UK is going to withdraw from the European Union. We still don't know what comes after that. Right? We still don't know what kind of deal they're then going to negotiate that's going to define the relations between the UK and the European Union in the future.
Go ahead.
Please.
How do we, as we go towards the election, how do we follow the outcome? I mean, polls in the UK are notoriously poor predictors of what happened, and the difference between a poll and actually the election outcome on a seat-by-seat basis, it may be very different. So. And the British electorate, according to the British Electoral Service, has been notoriously volatile, switching from both the Labour and the Conservative side. So how do you wrap yourself around in terms of tracking the election until the election day?
So the two things to watch. One is the Brexit Party might pull out of races where they would actually threaten the Conservatives. So races where splitting the vote between the Brexit Party and the Conservatives might actually lead to a Liberal Democrat or Labour MP to be elected. If the Brexit Party pulls out, then those seats can actually go Tory. So we need to figure out those seats. Then we need to figure out, on the other side, the Remain alliance, which has actually been brokered by a tiny party that almost nobody's ever heard of, the Renew Party. But it's brokered between the Greens and the Liberal Democrats and a few smaller parties to coordinate the races there. Then we need to take into account that Scotland has 13 Tory MPs, and they're going to lose 12 of those most likely. Okay. So the joke was always that there are more pandas in Scotland than there are Tory MPs from Scotland, because there are 2 in the zoo in Edinburgh. And so we're probably going to go back to that number. And the question really is, can the Tories win seats in the north of England that are traditionally Labour but that have voted Leave? Mm-hmm. And is that number going to be bigger than the number they're going to lose in Scotland and the number they're possibly going to lose in the south that might swing towards the Lib Dems?
Okay.
Looking at UK day one after Brexit, do you foresee it's a pretty divided society still? Thoughts of what the UK looks like over the next 10, 15 years? Is there a likelihood we see more separatist notions within the kingdom?
I mean, and one thing that I think we've learned in this country is that when a referendum decision is really, really tight, it takes a long time to overcome that and to get some sense of closure and direction where things are going. And that's going to happen, I think, either way in the UK as well. But of course, Scotland voted heavily in favour of Remain. Northern Ireland voted in favour of Remain. I'm not sure about reunification of Ireland, because actually Northern Ireland is getting a very good deal under this agreement, because they're de facto staying in the European Union, but they could benefit from anything else that Britain negotiates. Scotland, on the other hand, could very well hold another referendum on independence, might very well vote for independence, and I think if they say, well, we actually want to separate in order to stay in the European Union or rejoin the European Union, I don't think that the European Union would object to that.
First trade deal?
First trade deal, they will probably go for the US. They probably go for the US, which is going to be fiendishly difficult, and they're not going to get a great deal. And then Canada is going to be next, probably in line. I think it will be a little bit easier because de facto we already have a deal, right? The Canada-EU free trade agreement. But of course, Britain has a very competitive dairy industry. They will try to pry open that market here again a little bit and get a slice of it.
Let me ask, I mean, when we're sitting at this table 5 years from now, and this is an invitation for that time, so what do you think are going to be the things that we're talking about that aren't being talked about right now? I mean, are there things that are coming where people are, they're expecting certain things, but I'm asking you to kind of, what is the black swan, the unexpected thing that could be trickling out of this this disassociation and reassociation with others?
Well, the thing that I think that's hard to predict is how are certain parts of British industry going to fare? Are we really going to see manufacturing disappear?
What do you think?
Well, my sense is, unfortunately, that a lot of the investment that went into the UK was there to serve the European Union market, and that doesn't make any sense after Britain leaves. And it'll be very, very hard for the British government to support industry, specific manufacturing industries, to keep them. I mean, they're all foreign-owned. They're all foreign-owned. So that's very hard to predict. The other side, of course, that is very, very interesting is right now, anybody who comes from outside of the European Union and wants to serve, basically wants to supply financial services to all of the EU, locates in London.
Right, which is changing.
Which is changing.
Yeah.
I think some of that is going to change. The interesting thing is we don't know how much, and we also don't know, are they going to go to Frankfurt? Are they going to go to Paris? Are they going to go to Dublin? Are they going to go to Edinburgh if Scotland separates, which is not an unlikely scenario, right? And I think that right now that's probably where the biggest unknowns are.
I've only got about 30 seconds here, but just for both of you, from currency reactions to what's been happening with Brexit, I mean, what are you seeing right now? What do we have to watch?
With sterling, it's actually had a nice rally. The uncertainty about a hard Brexit dying down has really been beneficial to sterling. It's at a multi-decade low if you look at PPP and some of the kind of longer-term measures, and so probably cheap for a reason. A somewhat not terrible outcome with Brexit. I think the sterling goes materially higher from here.
Yep.